Hi everybody, this is Eugene O'Loughlin and welcome to my series of short how-to videos. In this video, we're going to learn how to write a simple if statement in OR. So we want to write an if statement which is an iterative statement in OR. There are two other basic types. We have the if statement plus the for statement and the while statement, and in this video we're going to take a look at a very simple if statement. So in order to illustrate how this works, I'm going to start out by creating two simple vectors. I'm going to create a vector called x and assign it a value of 10, and create another vector called y and assign it a value of 5. And let me run those two pieces of code. And we can see in our global environment that x has a value of 10 and y has a value of 5. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to write an if statement to test if x is greater than y. Now we can see already that it is. 10 is greater than 5, but I'm using these simple values to illustrate how an if statement works. So we've created our two vectors and it's time now to write our if statement, but before we do that, let's take a look at the logic of how this might work. So I have a diagram in my files here. This diagram, along with all code and all sample files that I use in this series of videos, are available in my GitHub, the link to which is in the information area underneath this video on the YouTube page. So an if statement is, there's two parts of my diagram here. I'm going to concentrate on the right hand side first in this flow chart. We've got a decision here at the top. If is A true or false? So it can only have a value of true or it can only have a value of false. So in my case, in my code, if I'm testing if is x greater than y, well that's going to be true, and if it's true I'm going to execute whatever code I write here as indicated by the process B. If the question is not false, if x is not greater than y, so let's say for example x had a value of 1, that's not greater than 5, therefore this question will be false and we would in this case execute whatever is in code C and then continue or finish our piece of code. The syntax of it here in the left hand side is the if statement and then a Boolean condition. So in my case I'm going to test is x greater than y. If that is true, then execute this first statement here, and I'm going to write a simple print statement to show how this works. If it's not true, then the alternative is to print a second statement, and then it's optional, but we can end our if statement at that point. So let's go now and see how this works. Line 7 I'm going to write in my if statement, and that's just simply the if function with an open and close brackets. And in these open and close brackets is where I test. This is my Boolean condition. So is x greater than y? So x greater than y. So that's my Boolean condition. And so I want to execute a piece of code if that is true, which currently it is true. So the next piece, and this is something you really need to be careful of when you are writing if statements or any iterative statement in OR, is what we call curly braces or curly brackets. I'm going to put in these here. And you can see that when in RStudio, when you type out the left one, the right hand side one is automatically listed. The convention is to press enter so that you will see usually in OR if statements a opening bracket and closing brackets on separate lines like you see here. So if that statement is true, I now want to print a message using the print function, print a message, and that message is simply going to be x is greater than y. So if that condition is true, then execute this statement. So now I'm going to run lines 7, 8, and 9. And we can see in our console, we get the message x is greater than y. That's because 10 is greater than 5. Therefore, this Boolean statement on line 7 is true. And if that's true, then this statement here is printed. Now what happens if I change x from 10 to a value of say 1? Now we know x is not greater than y, so let me rerun line 4 to and now assign, as you can see in the global environment, a value of 1 to x. And if I have not changed the if statement, so if I now run this, you can see that nothing happens because this Boolean condition here, if x is greater than y, this is no longer true. So in order to generate a message for this, I need a second Boolean statement. So if my syntax is here, so I now need a second statement if my Boolean condition is not true. So if it's true, execute the first one, otherwise execute the second one. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to move down past the second bracket and put in an else condition. And another open and closing curly bracket, again hitting enter and moving the curly brackets down to another line. And this time I'm going to use a print statement again to show how this works. And my statement here is that x is not greater than y. So this statement here will only be printed when the Boolean condition x greater than y is not true. So let's go ahead and run this and see does this message pop up. So let me run this. And we can see in our console, we get the message x is not greater than y. And that's because in my Boolean condition, in my if statement on line 7 here, I'm testing is x greater than y. That is not, if it's true, we generate the first print statement. If it's not true, as is the case here, we generate the second print statement. So what you can do is you can experiment with some of these values, but be very, very careful of your logic here. So if I now, for example, go on to test is x less than y, so on line 7, change is x less than y. Now we know that x currently with a value of 1 is less than a value of 5, value of y with a value of 5. If I now run this statement with no other change, what will happen here is we're getting a statement x is greater than y. Now that's obviously confusing because 1 is not greater than 5. So how did that happen? So when we tested the Boolean statement in line 7, it is x less than y. That is true because 1 is less than 5. So if that condition is true, this print statement will be executed no matter what is in it. So in my case here, what I need to do is to maintain the logic, I need to change greater than to less than. And then in my else then, if the condition is not true, I would say is not less than y. So now if I execute this statement again, you can see I get a more correct output, x is less than y, because my Boolean condition here in the if statement is true. If I now change the value of x back up to 10, rerun line 4 to set that value, you can see in our global environment it has a value of 10. Now run the if statement without making any further changes. We can see we're testing is x less than y. So x with a value of 10 of course is not less than y. So let's see what happens when we run our statement. We're getting the message x is not less than y in the console. That's because this message on line 10 is being printed because the Boolean statement x less than y is not true in this case. So what I would urge you to do would be to experiment with different values of x and y to see how this works, and also learn about how to control the output statements that you list here. It can be very easy to get confused with Boolean values and different values of x and y and our print statements here. Also be very, very careful. We can see we have on line 7 a curly bracket, on line 9 we have 2 surrounding the else statement, and then a closing bracket at the end. So make sure that you have matching brackets all the way through. It is a huge source of errors. So for example, if I, let's say I'm going to delete the one at the end of line 9 and rerun this piece of code, we're getting an error message saying that there's an unexpected bracket because we don't have matching brackets. So let me put that back in here, an opening and closing bracket. You can see in RStudio has automatically put in a second one, which I need to delete. If I now run my piece of code, the code is executed correctly as I would expect. So that's how you write a simple if statement in R. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you for your attention.